So week 10 of the NFL season featured some pretty surprising, frustrating, whatever word you want to throw in there. Those moments were in this week's slate, and this included a Super Bowl contender getting blown out by a rival that is not good and just fired their GM. Then there were several other things worth looking at from all of these games, but the finale on Monday Night Football featured one of the wildest near in-game sequences I've seen in quite some time, where the opposing team literally screamed out the play that the Packers were going to run were correct, yet the play got ran anyway. One of the most baffling decisions I've ever seen. So I'm going to dive into that situation and look at really all the main takeaways from every single game over the weekend right after. All right, so week 10 of the NFL season featured a mix of upsets, blowouts, and some down-to-the-wire finishes, and you can maybe even sprinkle in a very weird Monday Night Football game. We'll get to all that, but let's start with the Colts and Falcons, who kicked off the weekend slate over in Berlin, Germany. Jonathan Taylor had his best game of the season, which is saying something because he's been going nuclear all year long. However, he quite literally carried this Colts offense in this game. He carried the ball 32 times for a whopping 244 yards and 3 touchdowns. The fourth time this season he's had 3 touchdowns in a game. It helped him pass Edgerrin James for most rushing touchdowns in Colts franchise history now with 66. And Taylor became just the 4th running back in league history to have over 200 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in a game twice in his career. The others are Jim Brown, Adrian Peterson, and Derrick Henry, so pretty good company there. The guy is on pace for over 1,900 yards and 26 touchdowns. Mind-blowing stuff we're seeing out of JT this season. He's obviously making a case for an MVP candidate. I know he's probably not going to get it because it seems to be a quarterback award, but he's making a strong case to say the least. One of his scores came on this 83-yard run where he bounced it outside after initially getting stuffed at the line. This was the longest run of his career, by the way, and I also believe the longest play from scrimmage or longest run from scrimmage in international history for the NFL, and that put Indy up by 5 with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. This game actually went to overtime, though, because Tyler Algier punched it in at the goal line. Then they also got the 2-point conversion. After that, Indy still had enough time to get into field goal range and hit a 44-yarder to help send this to overtime. Well, the Falcons got the ball first, but Penix was sacked on 3rd down and they had to punt. Next score obviously wins after that, and on Indy's first possession, a shot to tight end Tyler Warren, dog, got them into field goal range. But no need for that when you have Jonathan Taylor, who can just get you into the end zone instead, and that is exactly what happened. Colts won it 31-25 as they move to 8-2 on the year and share a tie with the Broncos and Patriots for the best record in the AFC. Danny Dimes was a little sloppy at times, kind of back-to-back games. Not as bad as 2 games ago, to be clear, but he threw a pick and lost a fumble. He was also blitzed on 46% of his dropbacks and took 7 sacks. That didn't help things for sure. So got to give him credit for hanging in there and making some clutch throws down the stretch. The Colts have a well-earned bye next week, and then they head to Arrowhead week 12 to take on the Chiefs. Should be a really good game. The Falcons will play the Panthers, who just proved that the NFL is almost impossible to predict. Last week, they beat the Packers on the road, but this week they were held to just 7 points and lost to the previously 1-8 Saints in Carolina. What is this season? Rico Dowdle gave them a 7-0 lead after their first drive, and that was their last points of the game, which is pretty crazy. Tyler Shuck had a much better outing than last week in his NFL debut, even without Rashid Shaheed, who was traded to the Seahawks. Shuck connected with Chris Olave on a 63-yard touchdown after J.C. Horn fell down on the play. Then later, he hit Jawan Johnson for his 2nd touchdown of the day. But look at this. J.C. Horn tripped again while being the man in coverage. Give credit to the Saints for making the plays and their defense for pitching a shutout outside of that first possession. Shuck was 19 of 27 for 282 yards and those 2 scores, and after the Saints won 17-7, he became the first rookie quarterback to win a regular season game for New Orleans since 1981. I was -10. And even though the season is long gone, I'll be keeping tabs on Shuck the rest of the way because I'm curious to see how he develops in these last 7 games. It can't look any worse than Justin Fields in this Jets offense, though. That's for sure. Hate to say it, but yeah, it's not great over there. Look at this. Justin Fields had 54 passing yards for the entire game against the Browns on Sunday, and 42 of those came on a screen pass to Breece Hall. Electric play by Brees, to say the least, and he was sacked 3 times for 12 yards, obviously talking about Justin Fields. So if you remove that screen to Brees, he had exactly 0 net passing yards. I know he only threw the ball 11 times because they were pounding the rock, but still, that's not what you want to see from your starting quarterback. Luckily for them, though, the Browns are allergic to winning on the road. They're 0-5, and the Jets special teams unit scored not 1, but 2 touchdowns in this game. Kene Nwangu housed a 99-yard kickoff return in the first quarter. Then the Browns went 3 and out, and Isaiah Williams took the punt 74 yards to the house, and that's how the Jets scored all 14 of their first half points. The last time a team had a kickoff and punt return for a touchdown in the same game was in 2017, but you have to go back to 2007 to find a time where both happened in the first quarter. So the Jets somehow rattled off their second straight win, even after trading Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. I bet you there's some people in the front office that want to tank and aren't happy with Sunday's win, obviously preferring a higher draft pick instead, but oh well, they didn't trade Garrett Wilson, but he aggravated his knee that kept him out of 2 games already, and it's reported that he'll miss the next 3 to 4 weeks now, so definitely a bummer for them, though maybe not the end of the world if the goal is to tank. Next up, the biggest shocker of the week had to be the Miami Dolphins not just beating, but beating the brakes off of the Buffalo Bills. The Bills were coming off the high of beating the Chiefs, and the Dolphins were just on the other end of a blowout against the Ravens that dropped them to 2-7. Combine that with the fact that Josh Allen was 14-2 against Miami coming into this game, and nobody on earth, including myself, was picking the Dolphins to win. I thought it was going to be a long day for them, too, after Tua threw a pick on their opening drive, but Tua got it going and threw 2 first-half tutties, with Jalen Waddle beating the rookie Maxwell Hairston on this one. Devon Achane carried the offense in the second half. First, he got loose for a 59-yard touchdown run. Then on their next drive, he busted off a 35-yard score. He was slippery all afternoon, forcing a career-high 11 missed tackles, and of his 225 yards from scrimmage, 195 came after contact. For the Bills, they just couldn't get out of their own way. Josh Allen threw a pick, and both he and James Cook each lost a fumble. Their run defense is a problem, almost 150 yards allowed on the ground per game. That's the 3rd worst in the NFL. Devon Achane then proceeded to run for 174 yards alone on Sunday, another example of how important Ed Oliver is for them and how badly he's missed as he's out with a torn bicep. The injury news gets worse for them too, as their rookie defensive end Landon Jackson tore his MCL and PCL. He hasn't been ruled out for the season at this point, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did. Then Dalton Kincaid left in the first half, I believe, with a hamstring injury, and his status is currently week to week. So not great, especially when you don't have much of a dynamic group of pass catchers as it is, and Dalton Kincaid is one of your primary guys. Either way, Dalton Kincaid should be back sooner rather than later, but this is the first time the Bills have lost to the Dolphins since week 3 of the 2022 season. And crazy enough, Mike McDaniel made sure to let some Bills fans know about it. This picture surfaced online. I think we've even got a video of it as well, showing Mike McDaniel driving by a bar in Miami and trolling Bills fans from his car. He wouldn't confirm or deny whether it was real when asked about it yesterday, but I would not be shocked. It sounds and looks, according to the video, very on brand for Mike McDaniel, to say the least. For a moment, it looked like McDaniel was going to be the next coach fired after Brian Callahan, but ownership is reportedly riding with him through at least the rest of the season, and it turns out it's another Brian getting canned. Brian Daboll, that is, who was let go by the Giants yesterday morning after they fell to 2-8. Their GM, Joe Schoen, is safe and will lead the hunt for the next head coach, and I can't lie, a young nucleus consisting of Jackson Dart, Malik Neighbors, Cam Scadaboo, plus that elite defensive line might be enticing enough to woo somebody over there. Anyway, the reason for Daboll getting fired was because, yet again, they had a late lead on the road, and yet again, they blew it. New York was up 10 in the 4th, but Caleb Williams made some big plays with his legs. A 29-yard scramble set up this Rome Odunze touchdown on the next play. Then, after they forced a 3-and-out, Caleb took off again, and this time found the end zone for the go-ahead touchdown that got them the W 24-20 after the Giants turned the ball over on downs. Well, the reason for the Giants' late collapse is that Jackson Dart left with a concussion on their first drive of the 4th quarter. Russell Wilson ended up having to come in, and that's not great. And during his 3 drives, they punted twice and turned the ball over on downs. And after this latest collapse, the Giants are now 0-4 in road games in which they've had a 10-point lead. Absolute insanity. That's part of the reason why Daboll was fired, with offensive coordinator Mike Kafka now stepping in as the interim head coach. Whoever the coach is, a point of emphasis for them has to be keeping Jackson Dart healthy. Dart has been evaluated for a concussion 4 separate times this year already, and it makes sense because he plays very passionately, but it can be reckless at times, and he doesn't protect himself. I respect the aggressive mentality, and it's why he scored 7 rushing touchdowns this year, tying Cam Newton for the most by any quarterback in their first 7 starts. But it's hard to help your team win when you can't be out there on the field, so I would think they try and adapt their play style, I think, hopefully for Jackson's sake. At least that's the hope. For the Bears, this is their second nail-biter in a row following that insane Bengals game in Week 9. Now they'll hit the road to play the Vikings, who beat them in Chicago all the way back in Week 1. The tables have turned since then, though. The Bears are 6-3, and the Vikings are now 4-5, but 2-2 with J.J. McCarthy as their starter. They started out hot against the Ravens, forcing a 3-and-out, and then scoring a touchdown on their opening drive. But the offense sputtered throughout, and McCarthy threw a couple of picks on some deep shots. It was a very up-and-down performance for him. He looked okay at times, then would miss some throws here or there, and in the end, he was just 20 of 42 for 248 yards, a touchdown, and those 2 picks. One thing I don't understand is how the Vikings had 8 false start penalties while playing at home. How is that even possible? It was the most false starts by a home team in the last 16 years. The Ravens honestly weren't that impressive on offense themselves, but they took care of the ball and forced those 2 picks, plus a fumble on a kickoff return that set them up with great field position. Baltimore's defense has gotten a lot healthier, and after allowing over 35 points in their first 5 games, they've given up less than 15 in their last 4, and it appears their trade for Draymond Jones has already paid off because he got home for a sack on J.J. McCarthy, and that's his 5th game in a row with 1. That's the longest active streak in the league. Combine the defense's success with the return of Lamar Jackson, and that's why this team has won 3 games in a row, and they are not dead yet in the playoff hunt or for the division, especially with the Steelers losing 3 of their last 4, but more on them later. This game against Minnesota was actually Lamar's 100th career start, and get this, he has an impressive 73 wins in that span. That's the 4th most among any QB in their first 100 games, behind only Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, and Robert Staubach. But on top of that, he actually has the fewest interceptions of any quarterback in their first 100 starts and the most team points in those 100 starts. He's got his team to 4-5 now. They're just a game behind the Steelers in the AFC North and 1 game in front of the Bengals, who, for what it's worth, should be, I think, getting Joe Burrow back soon. His 21-day window to return from IR opened up, and he was, in some capacity, at practice on Monday. So, again, his return window's open, and I think we could potentially expect him to play sometime in the next few weeks. The division that's got everyone's attention right now, though, is the NFC West. The Rams and Seahawks are looking like the 2 top dogs after dominant wins on Sunday. Seattle came out guns blazing against the Cardinals, going up 35-0 with 8 minutes left in the second quarter. Yeah, you heard that right. In the second quarter, Jackson Smith-Njigba caught a 43-yard bomb to get the party started. Then things quickly got out of hand. Linebacker Tyrese Knight forced 2 fumbles, okay? 2 fumbles in the first half. Both were strip sacks on Jacoby Brissett. The plays looked pretty similar as well. And on both of those fumbles, DeMarcus Lawrence was the one who scooped it up and returned it for a touchdown. Both guys doing the same thing each time, one of the craziest things I have ever seen. Lawrence is only the 4th player in NFL history with multiple fumbles returned for touchdowns in the same game, and the first player to have both of those touchdowns be for longer than 20 yards. Those plays were huge, and they helped Seattle build up such a big lead that Sam Darnold only threw the ball 12 times, and they ran 46 times. They called a run on 78% of their plays, basically just proceeding to bleed the clock for the rest of the game. The Seahawks are honestly on fire. They moved to 7-2 and look like real contenders. This is proof of how dominant they've been. They're just the 4th team in NFL history to score 31 or more points in the first half of 3 different games in the same season. It hasn't been done since 1980, and we're only halfway through the year. Next week is going to be a big test for them, though. It's going to be a battle for the top spot in the NFC West against Them and the Rams can't wait for that one. Matthew Stafford has gone scorched earth as of late, and he was throwing darts again on Sunday against the 49ers. If you go back to the last 6 games, he has thrown 20 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. This week against San Fran was his 3rd consecutive game with at least 4 passing touchdowns and 0 picks. That's actually an NFL record. Speaking of records, Stafford got his record up to 500 for the first time in his NFL career. He had a sub 500 record because of all those hellish years with the Lions, but after their win over the Niners, he's up to 115, 115, and 1. He's a heck of a quarterback, still borderline top 5 in my opinion, and he's especially dangerous because of all the weapons they've got on offense. Puka and Devontae each caught a touchdown this week. Then Kyren Williams had himself a pair on the ground. At one point, they were up 21-0 before the Niners made it interesting, and then it was 28-20 in the 4th. But LA put the game away with 2 touchdowns in the final quarter as they got their revenge over the Niners for that overtime loss on Thursday Night Football back in Week 5. Aside from a 4th down interception late in the game, Mac Jones looked good for the most part, just 6 incompletions, 319 yards and 3 touchdowns while avoiding any sacks. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough against this high-powered Rams team, and LA's defense did a good job of limiting Christian McCaffrey, at least on the ground. Despite it not being the best day for CMC, he did become the 4th player in NFL history with 7,000 rushing yards and 5,000 receiving yards, being truly one of the best dual-threat backs of all time. It's good to see him healthy this year. I just hope it stays that way because they are using this man a lot. And then we'll see if Brock Purdy can return here sooner rather than later as well. The same goes for Jaden Daniels, who was out after dislocating his elbow last week. No idea if he even returns this season. There is a chance, albeit slim. I'm not confident, but he's already been ruled out for next week, as has Scary Terry, and the team is now 3-7 after getting smoked by the Detroit Lions. Jahmyr Gibbs popped off for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns on 15 carries, and with that, Gibbs became the 5th player in the history of the league to score more than 40 touchdowns before turning 24 years old. Jared Goff was nearly perfect, 25 of 33 for 320 yards, 3 touchdowns, no turnovers, and no sacks. Detroit mollywopped them 44-22 as the Commanders lost their 4th game in a row by at least 21 points. They're the first team to lose by that much in 4 straight games since the Cardinals in 2002. That's how long ago it was. I can't even read straight. So yeah, not great. And honestly, that was a very weird game that got unhinged for really no reason. At one point, a dumb and possibly drunk fan, don't need to assume too much, but come on now, tried running onto the field and got tackled by security, though I think this other security guard got the worst of it, unfortunately. Then DaRon Payne punched Amon-Ra St. Brown and got ejected, then suspended and fined on Monday. And then Donald Trump was in attendance, and I don't really care where you lean politically. It's only noteworthy because the last time a president attended a regular season NFL game was Jimmy Carter back in 1978. So it was just a weird game all around, but the Lions got the W. That's all that matters, and they advanced to 6-3. They've got a big NFC showdown against the Eagles coming up next, and I'll get to their Monday night matchup against the Packers, one of the most explosive, exciting first halves I've ever seen in my entire life. We'll get to that here in a bit. But let's get in first to Texans and Jags. Davis Mills filled in for C.J. Stroud after he was ruled out days prior with a concussion, and while his first 3 quarters were pretty forgettable, he threw a pick on the 3rd play of the game. He threw 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter and scored the go-ahead touchdown on a 14-yard scramble to complete the craziest comeback of the week. Everything was going right for the Jags to start. Parker Washington even housed a punt return, and they had a 29-10 lead entering the 4th quarter. But the Texans weren't dead yet, and they scored 26 unanswered points to win 36-29. It really should have been 30-29, but on the final play of the game, Trevor Lawrence was strip sacked and the ball popped up into the hands of Sheldon Rankins, who returned it for a thick 6 for some nice style points. It was the 2nd largest comeback in franchise history, and before Sunday, the Jags were the only franchise in the NFL that hadn't lost a game in which they had a 19-point lead or better. They were 53-0 prior to this game, now 53-1. The Jags didn't stand a chance because I think the Texans were wearing super glue on their gloves, obviously being a bit dramatic here, but Derek Stingley snagged Trevor Lawrence's pass here with one hand. Then on this 2-point attempt in the fourth quarter, Nico Collins did the same thing, making an incredible grab in the end zone. Danielle Hunter was also a standout from this one. He had a season-high 8 pressures, turning that into 3.5 sacks. Unreal. We'll see if CJ Stroud is back next week. They've got the Titans up next with a chance to get back to 500 on the year. Jacksonville, meanwhile, will look to bounce back against the Chargers next week. Not going to be an easy task after seeing the way the Chargers handled the Steelers with ease on Sunday Night Football. We'll get to that game in a moment, but before we do, the Patriots got an impressive win over the Bucs on Sunday, who were coming off of their bye. It was the Travion Henderson breakout game with Ramondre Stevenson missing his second straight with a toe injury. He had it handled, though. He had 147 yards and 2 long touchdown runs, one for 55 yards and one for 69 nice yards. That second one he broke was with under 2 minutes left in the game. The Pats were up 5, and this was pretty crazy to me. He had so much separation on his outside run that he had time before crossing the goal line to look over to his coaches and make sure if he was okay to score or if he should go down and, then do the whole kneel out the clock thing. Well, he was able to score. That was pretty electric. Their other rookie, Kyle Williams, he got increased playing time with Kayshon Boutte out. And while he only had 1 catch, he made it count by taking it 72 yards to the house for his first touchdown of his NFL career. It was a great game to be a rookie because Emeka Egbuka caught a touchdown and his fellow rookie teammate Tez Johnson caught 2. In total, there were 6 touchdowns scored by rookies in this game, and that's the most in any game in the entire Super Bowl era. He's not a rookie, but Mac Hollins had a solid day as well, leading the team in targets, catches, and yards, topping the 100-yard mark for the second time in his career. New England is now 5-0 on the road, and they've scored at least 23 points while not allowing 23 points in their last 7 games. That is the longest streak in team history. Only 8 teams have done that previously, and out of them, 5 went on to win the Super Bowl. I hate that stat, okay? I'm not saying New England's going to win the Lombardi or anything. I mean, I hope not. They've scarred me for basically my entire childhood, but they have rather quickly become very good again. The Bucs dropped to 6-3, but still have the lead in the NFC South. They've got back-to-back road games against the Bills and Rams coming up, so those are tough games. But then it's the Cardinals, Saints, Falcons, Panthers, Dolphins, Panthers again, so they'll have a good opportunity to get some momentum going into the playoffs. The Chargers have a bit of momentum going after winning their 3rd straight on Sunday Night Football. They were in control over the Steelers all night, winning the time of possession by 15 minutes in the turnover battle 3-0. It was Aaron Rodgers' worst game as a Steeler, as the old geezer was just 16 of 31 for 161 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks. Herbert had a modest 220 yards and 1 touchdown to Ladd McConkey, who topped 100 yards for the second time this year. And while Keenan Allen only had 2 grabs on the night, he passed Antonio Gates for the most catches in Chargers history, which was pretty awesome. Then, this was cool too. Khalil Mack recorded a sack on Aaron Rodgers, and it was actually for a safety, but he became just the second player in NFL history to have 35 sacks with 3 different franchises: the Raiders, Bears, and obviously the Chargers. One thing I am concerned about with this team, though, is their pass blocking. Justin Herbert took 5 sacks in this game. He's taken the 3rd most of any QB this year. I believe is also the most hit quarterback in the NFL this season. And the team is without Joe Alt for the rest of the year after already losing Rashawn Slater before the season. They're still a very talented team. I just think they need to keep him upright if they want to have a chance at a deep playoff run, because at one point in this game, he actually got tackled from behind. Something happened to his ankle, rolled. They had to tape it up. I think it's a slight ankle sprain, but we'll find out later this week, I'm sure. It's going to be a fun race to follow in the AFC West. You've got LA at 7-3. The Broncos are at the top, 8-2. They played one of the grossest games I've ever seen in my life on Thursday Night Football against the Raiders, though. Both quarterbacks were just straight up bad, but Denver's defense remains elite, and they got home to Geno 6 times on the night. Like it or hate it, the Broncos are 8-2 with a 5-0 record at home. They just keep finding ways to win. That offense was not good at all, and they've got a real shot regardless, in spite of that, at both the AFC West and the number 1 seed in the AFC. There's still 7 games left for them, including 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs and another against the Chargers, who they've already lost to this year. So they don't have it locked down by any means, but they put themselves in a good position at this point in the season. even though it pains me to admit that. But it doesn't pain me to admit that last night's game between the Eagles and Packers was one of the biggest letdowns of the season. I don't know if I was expecting a full-on shootout or anything like that, but I certainly didn't see a 0-0 game at halftime incoming. In fact, there hasn't been a game that was scoreless at halftime in either of the last two seasons until Monday Night Football. Something else that was painful to watch was the Eagles' blatant false start on their first tush push of the game. I mean, it was very obvious. Even Troy Aikman and Joe Buck pointed it out. And the reason I even bring this up is because this happens almost every single game for the Eagles. I'm not over here watching for them every single play. I just see social media from former players to multiple fan accounts from a bunch of different teams pointing this out every single week. So yeah, fans, of course, are frustrated that the Eagles continue to get away with this, and I'm not even insinuating the refs are rigging games for them or any of that low IQ stuff. It's just get rid of the play. I get that it's hard to officiate in real time, but good God, man, you got to do something about it. I think this play, honestly, is done after this year. They voted to ban it last year, and it fell short by just 2 votes. Well, I would bet my house that it is out of there this offseason. Regardless if players are pushing the quarterback from behind or not, though, they've got to start calling false starts on these sneaks, no matter what team is trying to run them. The Packers, for example, ran a sneak of their own in this game and were flagged for a false start once, but they were not flagged on another one where the left side of that line clearly moved early. A false start is a false start is a false start, so you got to start flagging it, I think. In theory, you should. Anyway, back to the game. The no scoring first half was a result of both teams fumbling, solid defense at times, as well as poor offensive execution at other times. And did you know the Eagles have now had the most 3-and-outs in the NFL this season? That's kind of wild considering they have Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Saquon Barkley, but I digress. The third quarter opened up finally with some points. The Eagles got a field goal, so good job. It remained 3-0 going into the fourth, though, and that's when Devontae Smith mossed Evan Williams in the end zone for the first touchdown of the game. Green Bay actually responded with a touchdown drive of their own, and they had a chance to tie or take the lead after forcing Philly to punt. But Josh Jacobs fumbled on this 4th and 1, and that was pretty much all she wrote. I'm going to circle back to that play in a moment because the Eagles knew the exact play the Packers were going to run, and Jordan Love did absolutely nothing about it. But after that, the Eagles surprisingly went for it on 4th and 6, throwing a go ball to A.J. Brown that resulted in a turnover on downs and gave the Packers a tiny bit of life. They had 33 seconds remaining and not that far to go, really, to get into field goal range. They didn't have any timeouts, so that probably factored into why the Eagles went for it. But still, a few plays later, Brandon McManus did try a 64-yard field goal. I mean, he tried one after a timeout was called and got really close, but the second one was way off, way left, and it looks like this photo. That's how he aimed. At least that's how it appeared, and the result of that ended in an Eagles W, yet another one. The crazy thing is, Week 10 started out with that 10-7 Thursday Night Football game and ended in this 10-7 primetime game. Just nasty. The newly traded for Jalen Phillips made an impression in his Eagles debut, though, recovering Jordan Love's very strange fumble at the end of the second quarter. And it's worth mentioning that each team lost a key starter along their O-lines, both to ankle injuries, actually. Lane Johnson left the game and didn't return, and same goes for Packers center Elton Jenkins. So we'll be on the lookout for their statuses throughout the rest of the week for sure. Philly, after that win, has now won 3 straight and is back on top of the NFC. They have a tie with the Seahawks, but they technically have the tiebreaker for now. Meanwhile, the Packers have lost 2 straight and dropped to 3rd in the NFC North at 5-3-1. And look, I have to circle back to this 4th and 1 the Packers tried and failed to convert on their second to last drive. Green Bay rushed to the line in shotgun and ran a draw play that had 0 chance. I was baffled by the decision of that play call to begin with. A draw play out of the gun on 4th and 1 with the game on the line. However, it got way worse when this clip surfaced of the Eagles screaming out the exact play call and direction the Packers were about to run. Listen to this. So the Eagles defensive tackle, Moro Ojomo, could be heard screaming inside zone this way, literally pointing to his right. So the offense's left. Jordan Love had home field advantage, so you could hear the opposing team call out the exact play call they were going to run, and he snapped the ball anyway. What in the actual cuss word was that? Josh Jacobs, after the game, said he could hear the defense yelling that, and it affected how he was going to run the play because they knew where he was going. Jordan Love said after the game that he heard them yelling that, and he saw a light box and decided to run the play anyway. Just mind-blowing decision-making there. You had 25 seconds on the play clock, 2 timeouts, and we're near midfield with a minute and a half to go, only trailing by 3. What was the rush when you hear the opposing defense yelling out the exact play? Why not audible? Call a timeout. You had a couple of them. Do something other than run the play. The exact play a defensive lineman was screaming out prior to the snap. Jordan Love did say that LaFleur called the play in the headset, so he ran it. But dude, you make $50 million a year. Do something else there. Good God. It's just one of the most baffling things I've seen from a top-paid quarterback in the NFL. And I'm not sitting here trying to dunk on Jordan Love, but sheesh, that was what lost them the game. Situational awareness was atrocious there. And while Packers fans have several other things to be frustrated about in this game, they might actually be haunted by this one play in particular for quite some time. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on this barn burner of a primetime game, as well as your reactions to the Week 10 slate, as well as Jordan Love still snapping that 4th and 1 football in the comments down below. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.